Welcome back to another episode of the Business Brain Dump podcast. And I'm really excited because, as many of you know, I am from Kentucky. If you did not know that, now you know that. And that is where I reside. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. But Teddy, you are our first split. So you're like 60% in Florida. The rest of the time, you are here with your thriving business in Lexington, Kentucky. So we're really excited to dive right in because you are an amazing, reputable builder. You have a great business partner. You've built an amazing company. So we're going to hear everything about starting the business, having your first real partnership, and how you've managed to really stay successful and relevant for 20 years. So this is going to be great.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast, Teddy. It's great to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. So, there's so much. Yesterday, we had a little kind of powwow call that ended up actually being we could have just recorded that. That could have been the podcast. It was so good. But we really started at the foundation. So if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of take it back early so everyone can kind of hear that. So you were in construction for a while and already had a pretty successful career. What made you decide to bring on a partner and start Andrea Rodgers?
Well, I think I was actually kind of trying to follow in my then boss's footsteps. He had similarly worked for another builder. I got his bearings and started a business. And I think there was kind of a ceiling to the opportunity at his company. You know, if I couldn't get my name on the deed and own part of the business, or, be his VP of operations, then I had to seek something else. So that's kind of what prompted me to make the leap. And he was gracious about it. He actually let me start the business while I was still employed with him, with of course, strict guidelines to make sure I was focusing, on his business number one.
That's pretty cool. I think everybody gets into entrepreneurship for different reasons. So was it just like magic? You walked down the street and there was your perfect business partner and everything just gelled right from the beginning? I'm sure that's how it went.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely how it went. No, I had this harebrained idea in college, and my then college roommate, he was on board for it. And as I progressed in construction, he was going to school to be a CPA. And so it actually ended up being, kind of the perfect match in the end. But it definitely didn't seem like that off the initial get-go.
So he was your college roommate? Because I didn't hear that bit yesterday.
Yeah, we were college roommates, and I was already working for the builder. And he was doing an array of different jobs. He worked in a property management group. He used to do the Keeneland horse sales. So wow. There's something real Kentucky for you. And so he had some ties to the equestrian industry. His father was a CPA. So he kind of, spent his college years kind of floating through different jobs, where I had pretty much found my bearings by the time I was 20 years old. I was like, this is what I want to do. I'd started there at 19. Within about a year, he made me a project manager, a project supervisor, and I started building houses, and I was addicted. I was hooked.
Amazing. And is construction in your blood? Like, how did you go from being in college to getting into construction?
It kind of is in my blood to a degree. So a story that I don't think I've ever told is when I was about 5, I was following my grandfather around, who was a carpenter, and I kept telling him I wish I had a hammer, which was my way of asking for him to get me some tools. And, now a 5-year-old with a hammer, that's probably not the most intelligent purchase, because I think like to tear stuff up just as much as I was interested in building it. But so, yeah. And then my mother's cousin is a developer. And because of him, when I was around 18, 19, I'd finished a stint at a property management company. And I was actually flipping their units. I was leasing their units. And so I kind of enjoyed it. And he kind of advised me that the company I was working for was actually headed towards financial ruin, and that I should come work for him. Little did I know how day one would go when he looked at me and asked me if we were going to get $10 an hour work out of me for about $7.50. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's an interesting way to start day one. Needless to say, that led me down the path, because eventually he connected me with a young and upcoming builder in his development, somebody who he had helped kind of propel into construction. I think he had, made a deal with him on his purchase of around 30 lots to get his company kickstarted off the ground.
Wow.
Then there was no looking back.
That's amazing.
And so you got into construction this way, and you were working for other people, and you learned the tool tricks of the trade. That's how you kind of picked it all up. And then you thought, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah. Well, and it was not well thought out. I didn't have a business plan in place.
With your college roommate, that could have been very bad.
Yeah, and we started in 2006. So anybody that kind of knows what 2007 and 2008 brought, it didn't take me long to really question the decision. As somebody who dropped out of college in order to pursue construction, there was a point where I was having a few life epiphany moments where I thought maybe it wasn't a good choice to drop out of college to be a builder. So it was a rough start, but I guess that's the way to go in. Both feet, just plunge into it, and about the worst possible time.
Yeah. What do they say? Yeah. A smooth ocean doesn't make a good sailor. So you came in on that super rocky stuff. So now everything is like, I've been through worse.
Plain sailing now.
Yeah.
It does feel like that. So as you come back out of this, I've used the term battle tested before, because it feels like there's not a whole lot that can get thrown at you that could, that can really deflate, where you're headed after you've been through that once.
Yeah. So what were those challenges with Brett then? Is Brett's the partner that you convinced at college?
Yeah. I think the challenges with him is he was a few years behind me on, his business development sense. I think also we didn't know what his role was going to be in the company, even though it sounds so simple now. He was going to school to be a CPA. He was managing properties. It's of course 2020, right? Hindsight, because it all made sense later, but it took us a while to figure out that we didn't need another Teddy Rodgers in the company. We needed Lee Anderson to do a completely different role, one that I'm not really built for, which is trying to make sure the books are in good order, contracts. The administrative work in construction is just wildly important to your success.
Yeah.
I have many of failure stories where the contracts and the paperwork wasn't tight, and it cost us, or at least slowed us on our growth path.
Well, the year you got in the business, basically right before you got in the business, that took most builders to their knees. I mean, many of them don't build to this day. So when you talk about, and I see this with, you actually closed on a deal that was a flip this morning, but you have to be so good at numbers to build, to do construction, to flip. And that's always my fear when I meet people who are like, I want to get into flipping. I want to flip this house. It's like, whoa. Do you know how much this costs? No. That? No. This? No. And then so many builders are like, oh, but I met this guy at Lowe's and he's a great builder. He's going to GC and flip it. And that guy works for 2 weeks and then never shows up again. I mean, there's so much that goes into it financially. So the fact that you had that partner, and it's funny because us hearing this story, of course, Jamie and I are both sitting here. His father was a CPA. He's a CPA. He's obviously going to be doing the finances, the bookkeeping. So did you have him like learning construction or how?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I threw him out in the field. And that's another thing too, is like coming out of the recession, we had no choice but to take on whatever was there, whatever was available. So I was subcontracting for my old boss. So I was managing the construction of some multifamily and single family for him. I started doing some multifamily for another developer. And then we were working for a property management company in Lexington that owned or managed somewhere in the realm of 500-600 doors. And so we were painting, we were drywalling, we were fixing plumbing, sometimes YouTubing how to work on HVAC systems or things that I had no real physical experience doing. And both of us were doing that. And to me at the time, which made sense, I thought, he's not earning if he's in the office. And whereas some of these companies are paying us hourly or paying us fee based, and that's earning money. So the paperwork kind of, in a way, took a back seat to just trying to make enough cash flow to make it make sense. And in hindsight, it wasn't good because we'd sit in the office sometimes on a Saturday or Sunday and do hours worth of paperwork. And we'd have stacks of papers that would sometimes have $30, $40, $50,000 attached to it. That was sometimes weeks or even longer, that had been sitting there not collected on. So, I don't think you can, I don't think there's any substitution for learning things backwards in the hard way.
I feel like you've touched on a load of interesting topics there, because obviously in hindsight now, you know what your strengths and weaknesses are. But thinking back to Teddy back then, did you have that clarity? Did you think, I can do this and that, and Brett, he can do this and that as well?
Yeah, I think
the other thing I'm fascinated by is, this is a really important part of starting any business. Is in those early days, it's all hands on deck. You can't actually define your role at that early stage of the business. You need to be cleaning the toilets if they need cleaning, and getting on the phones if they need to be called. You have to do everything. So it's just
tool in one hand, phone in the other hand is often how that often felt.
Sandwich in your third hand, like I'm doing it all.
You'd be doing this with a drill, trying to drill in, and then sometimes whoever you're working for standing over you while you're taking a phone call and working on their project.
Yeah. I think people that aren't capable of doing that can't get past that first hurdle. You have to do that in the early days.
Well, and I think too, like in those early days, you don't, at least from what my own experience, and I know everybody's is different. Like I didn't realize how many hats I'd be wearing. I was really good at one thing. I was really good at building, but I had not spent years estimating. I had not spent years selling. Now I closed the projects. So the selling actually came really natural to me because I had closed hundreds of homes, and every closing was, you put on a little bit of a show, you walk them through, you tag drywall, you pick it apart, you tell them about their house. You create this experience for them. That was easy too. But I didn't have any real experience with the paperwork side, the marketing side, I didn't have to go on sales calls in between building. And so it became a lot more of a balancing act than I ever anticipated. And I'll pay homage to a book I read that somebody introduced me to about 2010, which was E-Myth.
Yes. We have a whole episode on that. We love that book. It's so good.
So it was kind of that first epiphany moment that, Anderson and Rodgers Construction had to be its own entity, that I was doing more than just creating a job for myself, that I was trying to actually build something, and then just putting clear separation of roles. There was no accountability if we were both supposed to do it. So E-Myth was kind of like that first nudge that I really needed as a business owner to start organizing it in a way to where I was actually running a business and not just working day in, day out to feed myself, but to actually try to grow a business.
I had to write that down. That was so good. Create more than a job for myself, because that's so important. I think, and Jamie, maybe you do a better job at letting go, I think, at times than I do, but not always. And I think that's really valuable, what you just said, because a lot of times when we start a business, all we're doing, we think we're creating freedom, and all we're doing is putting ourselves inside of a box. And so I love that you said that. That really probably hits home for a lot of people.
Yeah, I had exactly the same epiphany as I think you had as well, Teddy. When I first read E-Myth, I was like reading this book, and there's this anecdote that's talking about the lady working in the cake shop. And I'm like, I can totally see myself as being the lady in the cake shop with my business.
Was it Sarah? I think.
And it took the passion out of it for her, something that she truly had loved for years. She lost her passion. And you can see the same thing happening, because when you're, burning the wick on both ends, you're running full speed, and you feel like it's part of you. Any and every failure you take personal. And I used to scream at people. I said, you're dragging my name through the mud. I felt like I'd worked so hard to build this reputation. And so when people weren't doing what they were supposed to do, when people were failing on my name or my behalf, on Anderson Rodgers' behalf, I really took that personal and to heart.
Yeah. So those first hires and those people that you were managing, I guess, they didn't really have that freedom. You found it hard to let them make mistakes, I guess.
Yeah, because I felt like every mistake was a reflection. And the thing is a business like construction is just layered with issues, mistakes, hiccups. Letting go of that is challenging because when it was my mistake, it was real easy for me to own it. But I was always worried that other people were going to lie. We're gonna try to cover their mistakes, and that's the kind of issues where I was concerned, is because I had no problem accepting mistakes and creating a path to fix them. Like that was every day in construction. But
Yeah.
letting that somebody else represent me and my concerns for them not being prepared to fail and fail immensely over and over again scared me to death. I was worried they were going to hide stuff, cover stuff up, and in construction, if it gets discovered later, that's a far more expensive
Yep.
problem to fix than if you just address it right then and there.
I can
Yeah.
guarantee with, Jamie being in robot, AI, tech world, I can imagine that if you were, and I don't write code, but if you were writing code, I think it's the same for me, it's the same for Teddy, but it's an easy kind of clarity point to say, like, you're writing code. Well, if you mess up here, wouldn't everything after just not work? And you've got to unlayer now all this just to fix the root. And we have the same problems here. Someone will get something on their desk with property management, let's just say the property management portion. They get an issue or, attend a request or something. Instead of just asking for help or doing it right or owning up to it, they try everything in the world other than just to get to the root cause. And it just unpacks and creates so much more for me or for you or for Jamie or whoever's running that business to come in and pull it back and make the root cause right.
Well, you brought up code. I actually studied computer science engineering in college before I
Wow.
dropped out. But when you have there's whole careers created around just people combing through code and trying to find those errors, and that's the same way in construction. If you have a mistake and it's long since been covered, sometimes diagnosing it and getting to the bottom of it can be a nightmare, and it can take lot of problem solving and skills to kind of probably need to choose those words.
No, I think you can say any word, right, Jamie?
I was gonna say unfuck yourself, but
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if how that
We're an
fit.
uncensored podcast. This is fine.
But
Something like
it's
that would help
certainly
too.
it's a far more daunting task if you
Yeah.
try to cover it up and work your way around it
Yeah.
rather than just addressing it and fixing it. Because
Honesty,
It costs you more money in the end. Yeah.
yeah, honesty and transparency. Clients will forgive you for just about anything. They will not forgive you for lying to them or ignoring and avoiding them.
And so what kind of triggered you to read E-Myth? Was it something that happened with your team, or did someone tell you to read it?
I don't recall who encouraged me to do it. It's kind of like networking. Like I remember who encouraged me to network, but inside of networking, I learned so much because they had continuing education, because there's a lot of other young business professionals as well as older business professionals. And I was a coffee and sit and listen to people and ask questions, like how did you do this? How do you deal with your contracts in this? And I took a lot of what people were telling me and I went and immediately implemented it, or I went and immediately picked up a book. And to this day, I mean, like if somebody suggests a book, I a lot of times will read it. And it doesn't matter if it's completely related to the industry or if it just has very little ties or if it's all philosophical and business fable, because I feel like there's always little nuggets you can grab from that are going to help you sharpen your tools or get somebody else's perspective of maybe what worked for them. And it's not all going to fit. But there was actually a guy who got so deep into E-Myth, he ended up leaving the company he was with and started his own coaching. And so I feel like that might have been who encouraged me to do it. But I do remember him and I kind of nerding out over the book. I just don't remember if he was the one who told me to read it or if I read it and him and I just sat and had lunch one day. But it was a very necessary step to helping me kind of organize the way the company needed to function.
Yeah, that's great. I think for a lot of people with their businesses, they think they need to network with people that are in the same industry or in the same sector. And I think at the end of the day, you're trying to build a business. And if you're talking to other people that are building businesses in whatever sector, in whatever industry, there's so much that you can share in between each other. And I think that's the same. Like Andrea and I, like we met because we were both building businesses and sharing insights. And I think it was you, Andrea, that actually shared the E-Myth book with me, which has helped my business dramatically. So I think that's great to hear that you had that networking group of people in a similar place that were able to share what they were going through and help each other to build their businesses.
Well, and I always talk about too the success gap, and I got that from a book, but the success gap in networking organizations, you're not going to be the wealthiest, not going to be the smartest, you're not going to be the most successful in most places that you're networking with people. So some of these people were selling the jobs I wanted to sell while I'm selling down here. I'm literally like, okay, somebody's floor got ruined. Sure, I'll put $10,000 worth of flooring in your house, make enough to make it worth my time, but not a significant amount. Whereas these people were selling, $150,000 kitchens. They were the jobs that I wanted to sell. So in order to kind of see yourself going there and being able to talk to somebody that's already experiencing it, it really does help you bridge that gap in knowledge, because I had no idea how to sell it. So it didn't matter how bad I wanted it if I didn't know how to get it. So I sat and spent a lot of time talking to some people who were, I'd say, maybe even decades ahead of me in terms of their success. And I thank every one of them for the time they took to let me just pick their brain.
Yeah. And I think both of these things that you've just touched on, one, and really it's all encompassing, you are a forever educator, right? You want to educate people, you want to be educated, you're always learning, listening. And I think that plays into that first question, like, how do you stay relevant? I think that's it. And in fact, I would say I never want to be the richest, smartest, most successful person in the room. And if so, I need to go in another room. I always say that, because then I'm just teaching everyone else. I'm not going to learn anything. And I really love to give and get, right? So if and even we've partnered on a few things. And I think that you found, for example, the Red River Gorge, everybody was trying and trying and trying to get that ground to break. You just needed somebody else. You guys were so busy and had been in it so long. I just came like, why don't we just list it? Like, let's do it. And the next thing we know, we were breaking ground. And I think sometimes just bringing someone in that has a different skill set or a different perspective can completely change. So I'm all about partnerships, and I know that you are too. And I know Jamie is as well. I think that a lot of people are scared to bring people in, and I was for a long time. And you have to get over that mindset. You have to be able to talk about your deals, talk about your business, share, give other people information, because you don't know, they may have the most valuable, missing puzzle piece that you've been trying to fill. You didn't even know you were looking for.
Absolutely. You never know who's going to bring what to the table. And, and that's kind of one of those interesting things. It's like people, try to introduce me to people quite frequently. And I don't mind at all. Like, even if I know they're trying to sell me something, because you just don't know who they might be connected to, and what opportunity they might be able to present to you. If they feel like you're welcoming, if they feel like you really do take the time, if you care about the introduction, because my biggest referral source, architects, some of those connections have come from some of the most unlikely sources.
Yeah. Same thing with me. I mean, one of my biggest clients, it was this cold Zillow lead, and it was this young kid who couldn't afford a house if he tried to. And it was him and his boyfriend. He's like, oh, I've got this, rich grandmother, step grandmother in Hawaii who's going to buy this house. And I'm like, what is even happening? So I treated them with the same care and respect as $1 million client. And, now his grandmother is actually one of my great friends and clients, has been with me for years, has pushed me to take on different roles and perspectives. And I learn something from her every time I talk to her. So it's just funny. I treat every single deal, whether it's 100,000 or 1 million, 10 million, a development, a first-time home buyer, because you never know who their cousins, uncles, brothers, nephew is, and who they're going to introduce you to or refer you to.
Absolutely. Now, the architect that I'm referring to, that I was introduced to them by a guy who sprayed their building for bugs. And he just happened to be chatting them up while one of the principal architects was out on the patio. And and that's where the first introduction came. And in fact, somebody else then introduced them to me as well. And so eventually I met them and built enough of a relationship to where we've started getting some significant opportunities through their firm. But that initial introduction came from just a very unlikely source and really an unlikely method. Just two people chatting outside of a building and him being like, "Hey, I know a general contractor." And so yeah, it certainly is to me at this point, it's no longer surprising, but it's a benefit of just always being nice, kind to people, taking the time to hear their story, listen, see if you can help.
Yeah, I think it's a very common misconception from people when they're starting and they're building their businesses and they're trying to work out, what is their USP? Like, how do they stand out from everyone else? And they're looking at it kind of quantitatively. They're looking at, I don't know, how the speed that they can deliver, the price that they can deliver, the quality they can deliver. I think a lot of the time it really is about investing in those relationships and building those relationships with your customers, whether they're businesses or people. It sounds like with you, Teddy, a lot of people want to work with you because they like you and they like the people that are part of your team. Is that something that, like, when did you kind of find that out? Was that very early on, or is that something that came over time?
I think it's probably figured it out pretty early, but only because the subcontractors who I worked with, I was 20 years old trying to manage guys who were, some of them old enough to be my dad, some of them old enough to be my grandpa.
That's a tough
And it took a lot of effort and a lot of intentional effort to gain their respect so that I could call the shots. And I was able to do so at a very, very young age. And I did so mostly by treating them with dignity and respect. Like, I was never the person just being like, this is I wasn't dictating and I wasn't being mean and aggressive to get my way. Instead, I was, expecting them to deliver, but, at the same time, making sure they had the support there, that they knew I was ready. When I talked to them, I always spoke to them with kindness and I actually cared. Cared so much that when I started to become a businessman, I think I had a little withdrawal from not seeing my contractors really anymore, because I always felt like they were my people because I had gained their respect. And to this day, I think you could call some of them and they'll just immediately be like, "Oh, I love Teddy." And it's because they had a well-run job. They always got treated kindly. And I have a really, real high tolerance level for people's, I don't know, their diva status, Madonna, like sometimes they can be a little difficult and they can be a little, grouchy. And that doesn't even shake me. I'm just kind of make it a goal if they come in, and act like that. I'll just make them smile. I'll say something silly or joke with them, cut up, and until they lighten up just a little bit.
So you're talking about your people. So I want to take the people back so that we can kind of talk about that, because we now know that you found this business partner. You guys found the way you fit in, but how many people do you have working for you now?
We're hovering somewhere between about 19 and 21 people, because it as you grow as a business, things shift. People kind of come and go for various reasons. So as of today, I'm going to say 20, but I'm not 100% sure on the actual number, because every now and then I'll try to text all of them on a group text, and I'll try to work my memory. But it is kind of a cool thing. I talked to somebody who's kind of in a corporate type business, and they're kind of a number within a business, and I know everybody that works for me now.
Awesome.
Counting them and getting all their names into one text message sometimes can be a struggle, but I see them, I talk to them, I interact with them. My phones and my office is always open to where they can connect with me. So I think that's a good trade-off for working for a smaller business.
So how'd you go from this, you just got started, you and Brent just figured out, how the relationship makes sense. You were micromanaging probably because you needed to be and probably didn't have the right hires yet. So how'd you make that shift from micromanaging to getting the right people? Because I think we talked about the hurdle of, wearing multiple hats, getting through that phase, an economic downturn, but how do you grow? Like, what was solution for you and your partner to really get the right people, stop micromanaging, and take the next step?
So it there's definitely different layers to that. So I would say mindset was definitely a huge one. Like changing my mindset and understanding that I couldn't do it all. So humanizing myself and trying to take less roles. And then having employees who actually took the initiative, wanted to grow, wanted to succeed. I think I told this story yesterday. Employee called me and he was like, "Why are you doing my job, Ted?" And it was because I was so used to just people failing to do the things I asked them to do that I constantly found myself following up on the tasks that I asked them to do. So I wasn't ever really letting go of anything. I was almost just playing a middle position between them and the job, and ensuring that they didn't fail and let me down. And so it took a real strong employee. It took me changing my mindset, and then also too recognizing that some of the people that were working for me, that we were outgrowing them. Like they weren't going to be able to go with us to the next tier. And it broke my heart, to be honest with you, because I really cared for a lot of those people. It's just that as we grew as a business, they didn't necessarily match the direction we were heading. And so on one side, difficultness of it was letting go of people who I felt like I cared dearly about, and trying to do so and still keep some kind of relationship with those people too, because I didn't want to burn any bridges on the way out. I knew that we were headed a different direction, and that the future just didn't include them.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one there. Like, how do you keep that healthy relationship with those that stuck around as well? How do you make sure that they're still on board with the vision you have with the company and the way it's going, to make sure it's healthy?
Yeah, that was tough. Of keeping the buy-in and not losing people as you transition, because some of the people you wanted to keep as you were growing and transitioning, and you're putting more and more systems in place, some of them were resistant to the change. And not only that, we had such good high quality people. Some of them I think were destined to probably leave anyway, because we've had several that have gone out on their own and started successful businesses. And I take that as a compliment. But at the same time, I really wish I had maybe at the time fought harder to keep them. Mm-hmm. There was probably a mindset of like, a ceiling of where I was already paying them versus where I maybe needed to pay them to keep them. And had I had to do it all over again, I know we can't change it. I probably would have just sucked it up and paid them what they, wanted, and tried to fight harder to keep them. But who knows if that would have still stuck, because they're really good, high performing people. And read a long time ago, if you're training 4s and 5s, you're just training your next competitions. Again, I don't know if I could have kept them or not, but if I had to do all over again, I think I would have fought just a little harder. But yeah.
Do you have that, Jamie, in your industry? I feel like yours is a little different. I don't feel like anyone could come in and work for Auto Enhance and then duplicate it.
I think what's really interesting with me, like in the early days of hiring, is with technology, I was trying to hire people that were capable of doing a lot more than just being able to work on the code, to kind of try and do everything like the rest of us, like kind of founding team members were doing. And I realized it's really hard to find those people and motivate those people, because those are entrepreneurs, those are business starters, those are not kind of specialists in certain areas. So then when we started to kind of niche down on specific roles in specific parts of the business, I'm like frustrated because they can only kind of do that one thing in that channel. But then I'm realizing they're doing such a good job. Like that's who we need. That's how you build a great company, is by finding those people that are amazing at that place. That they are the ones that have the skills that you don't have and can help take your business to another level. I think the hard thing in tech, and I'm hoping this is changing now, is there's so much difference in salaries in technology. You've got like Silicon Valley, where there's just crazy money going in there. People are raising millions and millions of dollars on ideas that should not be pursued. You've got this discrepancy in terms of what people's expectations are for what they're doing. And I mean, we had a guy that we were working with, and we got on so well. He got on really well with the team. And, one day I got this kind of breakup text being like, "Oh, can we talk?" And I was like, "Oh no, what's happening?" And then it was, he didn't want to leave us, but he'd been offered a position and the salary was just crazy, something that we could not even contemplate because, the company that he's going to are just burning money away. So it's really hard in those positions to retain talent in technology. But yeah, I think we're seeing more and more now that those wild salary expectations aren't as crazy as they used to be, which I think is good for a lot of small businesses that are trying to hire good talent.
I think for me, the biggest fear I had early on was I was scared, and there is still a touch of this, Teddy, you'll understand. But when you're growing a real estate sales team, you want to be careful who you bring in because I'm literally I'm transparent, and I know you're coming too. So if I'm going to be transparent and give you the keys to the kingdom, I'm still kind of in that mindset a little that it's like I want to be careful because a lot of people, and I've turned people down who would have been crazy producers for 6 months, for a year, but then they would have had all my secrets and keys to success, and they would have just been my competitor in the same brokerage. And I guess we did have an awesome host, Alex, and she was like, people can't duplicate me because I'm the only me. And I do get part of that, but there is something in construction, there is something in real estate sales that certain things can be taught and duplicated regardless of who the person is. And I think that's why my agents have had such great success, but they're also great team longevity players. Mason, almost 3 years, Hannah's entering into year 2. I don't have interest of working my ass off to train somebody to turn around and leave me and compete with me 6 months down the road, which, Jamie, I don't think you have that. So I think you're lucky in that regard. But when you're a builder and a contractor and a real estate team, I do think you get that.
Yeah, I can't comment from Jamie's side, but I've got, I've got 3 or 4 competitors at this point. One of them performing at the highest level. And in fact, he came down and went on a fishing trip with me not too long ago, back in the fall, because I see him as, kind of as the one who got away. But I also have to put all the credit in his court. He came in, he was a sponge. He took every philosophy I ever gave to him and made it his own. I told you, I think yesterday, one of my constants in construction is that 3 people are going to let you down by lunch every day. And that's just a number I came up with. It certainly can exceed that, but it's the expectation that you're going to get let down. Such and such's employee didn't show up that day because he was sick, so they didn't show up to your job. Such and such, came in and they made a judgment mistake, over drilled a joist, and now you've got a structural repair. And it's like, and there's so many variables and so many people involved that it's inevitable that that's going to happen. And I called him one day a couple years after he left me, and I was like, what are you doing, man? He goes, oh, typical stuff. He's like, 3 people are going to let you down by lunch every day. And he's like, just dealing with that. I think it's already up to 6, but it's something him and I can relate on, because he understood that philosophy, it's not just knowing how to build, it's having some philosophical approach to all of the things that are going to come at you, because otherwise you'll get buried under the pressure and the weight of it. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people crumble under the constant barrage of human error factor that's involved there. And I've gotten to the point now, it's like somebody calls me and they're like, I'm probably about to ruin your day. I'm like, it's like, try me. It's like, if at this point I haven't seen it, every now and then I get a surprise. I'm like, well, that's a first. But most of the time it's something else we've always already seen. It's just, it's just another day in construction, another challenge similar to one we've already had.
There's something that really fascinates me about your journey, Teddy, is so you went to college to do computer science and then you dropped out to start construction. Did you feel like that computer science helped you with the business in any way? Or was it just, I don't want to do that?
I would say that what it helped me recognize is that I was in a field that I looked at it as being like a kid who, ran track in high school, took 15 years off, and then tried to try out for the Olympics. Like, I was getting circled by the people in that field. And so if it taught me anything, it was that I wasn't going to shine in that. I could smoke most of those kids in math. I call them kids. They were the same age as me, but they felt like they'd been coding since they were 5 years old. Like they were lapping me in the code language category. So it didn't matter how well I could compete in the math. And I was pretty good at the physics side of it too. So I actually tried to switch to engineering after I realized that there was no way I was going to really shine in the code industry. I tried to switch it over to like civil engineering and or structural engineering type specialties. But I got so embedded in construction, they didn't offer the engineering in the nights, weekends, and evenings. So even though I had enough credits almost to have a minor in mathematics, I didn't have the time during the day to continue it. But I would say that the physics, the understanding of that side, all the math requirements, I'd say that was extremely helpful. And then the coding too. I mean, if anything, I definitely developed some mindsets and philosophies based off of that. And I also had kind of an understanding for algorithms on a higher level. So when it did come to kind of get my toes wet in marketing, I kind of understood the layers to it. So, but as much as I understood it, didn't necessarily, I could have never coded it. It just, that was,
Love it.
I could tell that wasn't going to happen. I was going to be the guy in the back running for bugs everywhere. That's all I would have been doing.
You must have seen a lot evolve since 2006, right? I think you were sharing a little bit yesterday about how the different platforms that people were looking for construction had changed over the years. Yeah, it was
absolutely.
About Angie's List was like
so Angie's List was huge in terms of a platform for. So here's kind of even funny. Let me take you back even farther. When we started Anderson Rodgers, Anderson came first because I thought we needed to be in the A's in the phone book. Like that's where the mindset was in the beginning of this, because even though the internet was, was prominent, we didn't know what it was going to be. And in construction, they had realtors sitting on site. These people, houses were selling like wildfires. And so people were just literally walking up and signing contracts, and realtors who were sitting out there. Yeah. Yeah. Back in those.
I'm just going to go sit at a house with a paper, just sign right here. I've got my pen.
Yeah. That's there was realtors who from 1 o'clock till 5 o'clock, 5 days a week would sit at the houses, and they'd sell 40 houses a year.
Wow.
And so it was kind of this heyday. You had 24 to 48 hours to respond to clients. Well, you didn't have emails, you didn't have text messages. So as the early start of the development, we were worried about placement in a phone book, which, I don't think there's hardly a kid under 25 right now that could hardly even tell you they ever seen a phone book. And so it's kind of just funny how that evolves. And then it's like, all right, now we have to develop a website presence. And the Angie's List thing, before the website and before Google really kind of took the stronghold and the lead on it, Angie's List was the place. I met some of my best clients off of Angie's List. I've got a client who is literally working in the White House currently, and I met them through Angie's List a decade or more ago. And here's even the funny thing too, is she was an investor. She's wanting to buy a house to flip. I, at the time, really didn't like investors. Felt like they were cheap, and I felt like it wasn't my type of client. So when I met her, I was probably a little bit standoffish, very honest, very straightforward.
You're always very honest and straightforward. I can only imagine if you're saying that.
Yeah, especially if I'm a little perturbed. And she absolutely loved it. And now she's been a client for 13, 14 years. I texted her the other day, asked her when she's coming back into the business world, and getting out of the White House, or because, we had a lot of fun doing projects together. But that's kind of, again, and then from there, it was kind of how's becoming the next thing. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to kind of, one of those guys who's out on his own, who I tried to also get to go fishing with me and my other buddy who's out on his own. He was super tech savvy. He's the one that got us where we were on Angie's List. And then he got us there on House too, to where we start getting these kind of leads and these big opportunities coming through House and coming through Angie's List. And he understood the algorithms, like, of like, if you post it regularly, if you interact it with people who were liking your stuff, if you, about 6 or 7 key things that if you did those, it organically got you ranked. So we're doing this virtually for free. We're getting all these leads from Angie's List virtually for free. We're getting all these leads from House virtually for free, just because we had a good team and they knew and understood the algorithm. But once Angie's List sold and they became no longer a paid membership, it took a steep decline and did so quickly.
And so to this day, I know you've recently hired a young kind of social media guy. too, because
Yeah.
of Instagram. So this goes back to that how you stay relevant. You guys have been early adopters since early on. Even, thinking about the phone book, but willing to get on the internet, willing to get on Angie's List, willing to try new things. Because I think a lot of times what hurts people is by the time they try AI, try ChatGPT, try online marketing, try social media, like that platform's dead. I've known people who are like, yeah, I'm really trying to get it going. And listen, there's nothing wrong with Facebook. One of my agents, Hannah, kills it on Facebook. But, if you're just now getting into Facebook marketing, you're so far behind. It's like there's 16 other things you need to be trying and working on. You've lost all that business all the way. So it sounds like you've been good about kind of staking your position on new tech as it evolves and grows over the years.
Yeah, and we've seen the decline of several. It's like this was good, now it's not. This was good, now it's not. And then there's new things that come in that I'll try for a little bit and I'll see if it works. Somebody convinced me to do like geo fencing, which I decided that was creepy. I didn't really want people seeing that I was, paying attention to them so much that I was following them to the next web pages and everything else. And some of that kind of falls in line with it's like, all right, here's a technique that I'm being suggested to do, but here's the brand that I'm trying to build. Like I'm trying to build a brand to where, if I'm being honest, that I don't want to work for everybody. I want to be selective on who I work for. I want to have real authentic relationships with clients so that they can have the best experience, because they have to believe me when I tell them stuff that they're not going to want to hear, that they're, in order to have, those kind of honest and open relationships, that means that not everybody's going to be a good client. Some people are going to want me to be just a service provider. And I feel like we're more than that. We're trying to provide an experience too. So, I think that's that's the evolution of the technology, where it's okay, I'll listen to your suggestions, but then when I start to feel like it goes against what our brand is speaking, like if I want to be high end, I want to be exclusive, well, I don't need to be following you around the web, around the World Wide Web, all the places, just because you looked at me one time.
Well, I can tell you 95% or more of my deals that have gone south or have gone bad or just did not end great were because the clients felt like they couldn't trust me and they weren't transparent with me about their goals. And that, to me, you have to be selective as a real estate agent, because I cannot do my job if you are actually looking to buy an investment property, but you don't want to tell me that for whatever reason, and you have a primary home. I mean, I've had situations where people feel like they just can't trust me. They can't trust a real estate agent for whatever reason. They've had a bad experience in the past. They've heard bad stories. And had they told me, hey, we have a primary residence, we'd really love to buy this as an investment, like, what are our options? I could have guided them so well. But I've had people straight up lie to me. And we get to the point to where the mortgage lender is like, okay, so you do realize this is mortgage fraud if you're not, and then they're like, well, help. We actually want to invest. It's like, we've, what are we doing here? Or people who were, maybe looking at jobs in New York and in Kentucky, and they're currently living in Kentucky. The wife really wants to be here, but the husband doesn't want to be transparent that he really wants the job in New York. So they go under contract on homes. Had they been honest with me, I could have got them out during the due diligence period, but they wait past, and it's cost them time and money. So I completely get that. When you're building a home, when you're building a relationship, and you've got these complex transactions, if your client doesn't know, like, and trust you, it's probably not going to go well, no matter how hard you work or I work or Jamie works or his robots work. Like, it's not going to get the result the client wants in the end, because they were fighting against something else.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that clients stand in their own way a lot of times from day one. And I'll play the budget game with them. Budget is, it's not the most fun part of construction. We just went through a whole spill on this where we did a presentation for AIA on their continuing education. It was all about vision and budget. And, the vision's the fun part. Like, everybody gets excited about what it's going to look like and how pretty it's going to be. And I'm going to have this feature and that feature. And then the budget comes in and just kills the mood for everybody. And, but when I ask people up front, I'm like, well, what do you want to spend? They'll go, well, I don't really know. I don't really know what we want to spend. So I'll just play the budget game with them. I'll say, well, you want to do this, 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 and I'll kind of add some numbers together, this much on the kitchen, this much the bath, first floor, structural walls. And I'll go, all right, well, I think you're at like $450,000, $500,000. And they'll go, well, I was wanting to spend like three. So they did have a budget in mind, but but the vision was kind of, let's focus on the vision. Let's not talk about the budget. But then when I come in wildly over, all of a sudden now I'm the bad guy. So I try to do that very, very upfront and put that kind of right out there so that they know, like, this is where our trust starts. You have to trust that I'm not just going to try to run you up on your budget. I'm trying to build what you can afford, because I don't want to take you out to the car dealership and let you test drive a bunch of cars that don't have price tags on them. Because inevitably we're all going to go test drive Lamborghinis and Range Rovers and Maseratis. And because why wouldn't we? Those look fun. They're beautiful. They're attractive. But the reality is, how many people are actually going to walk off the car lot with those once they actually know what the price is? And so I try not to let them get too far into the vision, because otherwise then they're just settling and everything starts to feel like a letdown, like that it's not what they dreamed it was going to be.
I think this is another kind of misconception to people when they're starting their business and starting to get clients. They think that they can get everyone and everyone can kind of fit into their niche. But the reality is you need to justify your value. There's going to be people that want to go for the cheapest option and those that want to spend more. And you need to carve out your space. You don't need to adapt to everyone. And you just need to know that there's enough market and space for you to justify that and justify your value. So I think that's a really important lesson that people need to learn. But yeah, I guess we're kind of getting to the end of the podcast now. So I thought it'd be good if we kind of circle back to a few things here. So, we're kind of understanding your journey, everything that you've been through, Teddy. What would you do differently if you started again today?
That's a good one.
That is always a good one. I think it's probably not putting myself into as many arenas as I did. So when I first started the business, I bought a house to flip. I bought 2 lots to build new construction on, and I started remodeling, and I started building a custom house for somebody. So I started doing 3 things that kind of all sound similar. They all sound like construction, but they're completely different. And so I would have probably tried to narrow my trade a little bit more and done so early on, because, I did this flip. So I end up spending a lot of my own money. I extend myself financially, and the on the grand scheme of it, it was like the sweat equity and everything else I put into it. On paper, I think I made $14,000, but if you really look at all the time and effort and everything else I put into it, I really made nothing. And then the 2 houses I built new construction, I didn't think those out well. I didn't price them out. I didn't budget them well. So I ended up overspending, and I had 2 properties I couldn't sell that I ended up keeping as rentals for the next, half a decade or more. So I think had I had it to do all over again, I would have pumped the brakes, and I would have really just focused on a few paying projects and eased my way into it instead of really just going gangbusters.
Yeah. But these are the mistakes that shape you, right? This is how you.
Yeah. Those are the mistakes that almost made me quit.
The mistakes that bring you to your knees.
Definitely. And I was also doing all this while my wife was pregnant. So I was young, newlywed, and taking all these extra pressures on while still carrying a full-time job. So it was absolute turmoil and chaos. So glad to say I survived it all, including the upset wife. Survived that too.
Yeah, I love it. Do you have any more rapid fires, Jamie?
Let's see what we got. We got one habit that changed your business.
Ooh, that's a good one.
More than anything, reading. I would say more than anything, it was reading. And I'm reading one right now. It's called Think Fast and Slow. And it's a lot about just how the brain processes things, some of it automatically, which I think is 80% of life. I think I'm cruising through it. I don't even have to think about it. The other 20%, I have to work a little harder, think a little harder. It also talks about anchors, which I find interesting, creating anchors for people. But I won't go too deep into it. Reading has definitely been one of the biggest game changers for my business.
I've got a great one to kind of end it here. What is next for Andrea and Rodgers?
So I went and met a developer in Chattanooga, so Tennessee's next.
Wow.
And then the entire southeastern side of the United States. Honestly, like I've got invites to look at stuff in North Carolina. We were looking at a job in Georgia earlier this year that fizzled out. I've got people asking me about bidding jobs in Louisiana. So it's really for us, it's the entire southeast side of the United States.
That's amazing.
I'd say there's no opportunity within that region that I wouldn't pursue if it made sense.
So if you're in the
Fantastic.
Southeast, you now know who to call. Thank you so much for this. This has been amazing. I think there was so much that people can take away. This is one you could listen to over and over again and probably keep grabbing little Teddyisms, little nuggets out of it. But we are out of time, and I want to say thank you again so much. This has been so fun.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Teddy. This has been fascinating.
Yeah, Jamie and Andrea, thank you so much for the invite. I've really enjoyed this, and hopefully maybe I can come back on again someday.
I can see that for
Definitely.
sure.
Do this again.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I could certainly continue to rattle on about all kinds of
You're welcome
stuff.
anytime.
We didn't even get into my failures. I mean, goodness gracious.
We
we'll
just
do
wanna
an
make
episode
sure
just
that-
on that. We'll dive into
We could have a whole episode on
Teddy's
that,
failures.
on all of those. That's right. That's right. Here, it'll help somebody learn.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not so the hard way either.
Yeah, this is really great. I think what we've had in the past, like we've had quite a few guests on now, and a lot of them are further on with their journey from the beginning, but they haven't gone as far as you. I think you're kind of someone who's had the business for the longest and learned the most as well. So I think for a lot of people who are maybe just starting out, or maybe they're a few years into their business, they're going to get so much value out of what you shared today and you know, everything that you've learned as well. So yeah, really appreciate that. Thanks for coming on, Teddy.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been a blast. I appreciate the invite.